Welcome to Her Success Matters, a podcast exploring how advisors can work together to build a pathway for women to succeed in financial services. I am your host, Christine Shaw, Chief Executive Officer of Investment News. This podcast will give you rare insider access to the top financial services executives who are taking action to break down the barriers for the next generation of female advisors. You will also hear from some amazing and inspiring women who have forged their own pathway to success. Welcome to Her Success Matters. We're back for the second episode with Erin Botsford, founder and CEO of the Advisor Authority. Today, we're going to discuss Erin's action items that enable advisors to build a seven-figure firm. Erin, we're excited to have you again. Welcome back to Her Success Matters.
Thank you so much. It's always great to be with you.
And we covered so many great things in our first episode. Before we get into the depth of this, talk a little bit more. I think you really need to state the magnitude of building a seven-figure firm and how that is really reachable by advisors with the success mindset that you talked about earlier. Tell us more about what you need to do to adopt that success mindset. First, of course, would be taking your course. So tell us a little bit about that and how advisors can find your course.
I created this online course. It's called the Elite Advisor Success System, and they can go to eass.com/elite. Anyway, we'll put a link in, I'm sure. Yeah, so I started off with talking about the mindset of achievement, which I think is just super critical to building anything. And then the next one, I talk about my secret sauce. I teach advisors my secret sauce. Now, you have to understand that I had a policy. I didn't chase prospects. My policy was I would meet with a prospect. It had to be husband and wife together or male and female together if they were a couple. And I had to, in that very first meeting, get them to say yes to me. And that was always my goal. And so people in our office and for many, many years, they used to tease me because they knew I had that goal. I wasn't just going to chase prospects and keep calling them and chasing them. And so they used to call my office, they called it the web, like Charlotte's Web. And they'd say, nobody gets out of her web alive or something, meaning they knew that I had this goal. But I got really good at closing prospects on the first meeting. And truthfully, even in the book, I wrote a book called Seven Figure Firm, How to Build a Financial Services Business That Grows Itself. I never really talked about that in the book because that was my unique selling proposition. I didn't talk about it until I sold my firm 3 years ago. And now I teach my advisors everything from how a client or a prospect should be greeted when they come in, how they should be seated. I mean, you always seat the woman at the head of the table. You seat the man on the side when he's looking at you. There's no distractions. I mean, there's so much psychology that goes into that. And then I start with a focus on risk management. And we can talk about that a little bit more. But that secret sauce has made me multiples of millions of dollars. It's that valuable. And what's really cool is that my advisors are getting the same results, which is like amazing for me. The third course is all about prospecting and marketing. And we can talk a little bit about that and what I see wrong, what are advisors doing wrong when it comes to prospecting and marketing, because I see a lot. And then the fourth one is called team member training. I actually brought in my very best assistant. Her name is Jennifer. And Jennifer and I, we teach that course together. And so we will teach your assistant, if you're an advisor, how to best serve you and your firm. And then the last course is called The Machine, which is how do you hire people? What do you look for? How do you test them? How do you compensate them to get the kind of results that you need in your business? And so it's a very comprehensive course. And what ended up happening was I had a former advisor who just so happens he was very good at online marketing. He followed me around for 2 or 3 years, and we put this all together. Because he was an advisor, I remember he used to say, oh man, if I'd have only known that, I wish I'd have known that. So we were able to, these are things I was just doing naturally, right? I didn't think there was anything special about them. He was able to sort of dissect what I said, what I did, how I paused during certain times, and then put it all in an online course. It's just been a lot of fun. And most importantly, it only takes 6 months to go through the course. It takes about a half an hour to an hour a week. We dole it out little bits at a time so that it doesn't overwhelm an advisor. They can listen to my voice. It's in a medium where they can hear it. on an MP3 player. I have PowerPoints. They can highlight, underline in the entire transcript. They get all of that. Any kind of learning mode that they're into. In fact, I had a lady this weekend. She texted. She goes, just want you to know, most people, they binge Netflix. I binge Erin Botsford.
I love that.
Because she said she had a big meeting coming up this week and she wanted to be ready for it. So she was binging Erin Botsford. I thought, I've never laughed so hard.
It is funny because I'm amazed. I will talk to a lot of friends, including sometimes my family, and they'll tell me they binge this on Netflix or this and that. And I'm thinking, okay. But I think that's a difference between a mindset, because my daughter will sometimes make fun of me because I'm like, oh, I read this book and I'm working on this, and in the morning I do my TED Talks. But the good thing, like you were saying, with your format and that you can listen to it, you can go for your walk, because right now sometimes we're all trapped in our house, but just listening to that stuff and absorbing it while you're out doing things is a really great approach too. And
right. And the secret sauce in particular, I've had advisors tell me they have listened to that course 30 times. When you say this, they will say that. It's formulaic. There's nothing difficult. You just got to learn it,
Yeah, apply yourself and learn it, developing a formula. Before we get into some of that, because I want to talk about prospecting in the virtual world, is in our last episode, you alluded to some comments about your son and his comments around your success. And then today you woke up and you said you made millions and multi-millions and millions of dollars doing this. So tell us what your son said before we dig into some of the prospecting stuff.
One of the things that all women worry about, especially women that have children, is that somehow their success is going to cost them something. And I always, we all worry about my son. I had one son and he was only 6 when I got into the business. He just turned 37. I was always worried that somehow he was going to feel neglected or abused or maybe even not appreciate that I was making a lot of money, making more than his dad. I mean, women, believe me, we all go in through this, how I don't want to screw up my kid as a result of my success. And a lot of women use that as an excuse not to try and be successful or take their business to the next level. Well, I don't want it to cost my family. Okay. A year ago, right now, he was applying for a job. He works for a very large company. He was a military officer. He did 6 deployments in 8 years to the Middle East. He flew AC-130 gunships. Wow. He got back. He got a really good job at a major defense contractor. Last year, he was getting ready to go to this very big promotion. It started off with 30 people. It narrowed down to 2. It was he and one other candidate. And literally, I'd be like, how did it go? And he was practicing his interview. It was going to be a very high level position for somebody who hadn't been with the company that long. I found out, okay, he's down to the last 2. And I'm like wringing hands. He calls me up and I'm like, honey, how did it go? How did it go? And he goes, well, I think it went okay. And so I said, well, what did she ask you? Was the lady interviewing? And what about this? And what about that? And then he finally said, he goes, well, so what other questions? I said, what other questions did she ask you? And he goes, Mom, she asked me who in the world I admire most. And I said, really? What did you say? And he said, you.
Aww.
I thought he was saying you, meaning he was saying you to the lady who was interviewing him. And I'm thinking, well, you barely know her. That was kind of like sucking up.
Yeah.
I thought he was sucking up to the lady interviewing him. And he goes, no, Mom, you. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, I told her your story and all that you've overcome and how well you've done in the financial services business and how incredibly proud I am of you. I'm like, what?
That's incredible.
And she said, you know what? I think your mom would really like to know that.
And yeah, I bet you did.
So, I mean, it was like, it took everything and just brought it home to like, you know what? We women, we are so resilient. We can have it all. We're able to have great families and great children and be great moms and be great business owners and great bosses and all of that. And I want to make sure we just take that off the table for all the women watching this is, you know what? There's no give up here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, being a woman who's had a successful career and have 2 adult grown children, in fact, just last night, they were over, we made dinner together, we watched football together, we take vacations together. And I think that it goes back to sort of the wheels of life, and having it all is different to everybody. And you have to define what your version of that is.
Right.
And to your own truth and not worry about other people's views of that or judgment around that, and know that your children are going to be okay. Because proud of mine, and I'm sure you are, of your son and sister.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's get into then, we talked, it all starts really fundamentally is prospecting, right? And that you talk about that in your course, but I really want to discuss how that's changed out in a virtual world and how you can approach virtual meetings. Like here we are on Zoom, I guess we're an example of that. But what tips and tricks do you have doing this now in a remote environment?
Well, I think it's an advantage. Of course, I'm of the mindset that if I ever see a lemon, I have to get sugar and make lemonade out of it, right? But when I think about the money that I spent prospecting, I built my business doing a lot of different things. I talk about the 9 ways I used to prospect, but one of them was doing public seminars. You have to secure the room or the location. You have to buy them some food, or some cookies or something. You have to send out manual, invitations. I mean, it was just arduous, right? Now you could be doing a webinar, a seminar every night of the week. Yeah. And also this idea that people aren't available, they're much more available now. Here we are, we're on a Zoom link. If I would have had Zoom and if I would have had this virtual market 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I don't even know if I would have sold my company. I mean, to me, this is like nirvana. I don't understand when I hear people say there's some negative thing about it, because you could have, like I said, prospecting is a numbers game. And it doesn't matter whether it's a numbers game with you and I on a Zoom call or a numbers game with 30 people in a hotel room, giving a seminar, right? It's just a numbers game. And I think what I did very well, and this is what I teach in my course, is this. And if they don't remember anything else, I want you to highlight, underline the next statement I'm going to make. And that is this. People will not do business with you unless and until they have some kind of a triggering event in their life. Right. You don't just, it's like, I guess you go to your dentist every 6 months to have your teeth cleaned, but people don't generally hire a financial advisor unless they're going to get ready for retirement, retire, somebody dies, something happens, right? That's generally the impetus for hiring an advisor. So the skill set that I learned and I teach is how to create a triggering event in their minds so that they will hire you right now. And that is the art form that I use. And so you could be doing that daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly on online Zoom calls with people. So I think that I'm envious because, again, Zoom, if the pandemic would have happened 3 years ago, Christine, what would we have done? I mean, Zoom didn't exist back then. Yeah. So it came along right at the right time. And I think it's a gift. But it's only a gift for those people who accept it and then do something with that gift. One of the things I am doing, just as an FYI, Mike and I, the guy who works with me, we're actually tomorrow recording an entire course on online marketing, just because so many people are asking us about it. And the other thing I'm going to do for my students is I'm actually going to be doing seminars to the end user clients. So literally, they could team me up and say, hey, I want to present to you Erin Botsford, and Erin Botsford, I will sell for you and say, you need to contact your financial advisor and get these problems fixed right now. I'm going to create the triggering event for people. There's a lot of people who don't feel comfortable speaking in public or doing seminars or anything like that. So I'm going to be doing that. So we're super excited about that.
That is really exciting. I might even tune in for some of that. But yeah, let's talk about some of the reasons. I have found that people in general, especially if you're selling your services, struggle with marketing practices, whether it's in person or online. So what are some of the common struggles that you hear from advisors, and what would be some of your tips around that?
There's only one struggle, Christine, and that is marketing and prospecting is the most difficult part of our job. Yeah. Because what it does is it sets you up for rejection. And that is that is the reason those who make it in our business are able to get through that rejection. And what we do, all of us at times, is we make up stories about why we're not going to get on the phone or get in front of people or do a Zoom call. And we busy ourselves, we do our paperwork over here, and we can waste not only entire days, but we can waste weeks and months getting ready to get ready, okay? Yeah. One of my mentors, a woman years ago who I loved, worshiped, and adored. She was so direct with me on that. And she said, you can't hire marketing and you can't hire, well, you can hire marketing, but you can't hire prospecting. Marketing is third party. Somebody can send something out on your behalf. Prospecting is one-on-one, you mano a mano with a prospect. And think about it. If you could hire somebody else to do that, then they would just open their own financial services company, because everybody knows that's the hardest part of the business. What she taught me to do is she used to get those bags of M&Ms and shoot. Back in the day, we were dialing for dollars. Okay. It was cold calling or whatever it was. And she'd sit there and she'd make a cold call. And after she was done, she'd take an M&M and she'd keep calling, and she never quit calling until that bag of M&Ms was gone.
I love that.
I mean, it was that was how she managed, because she was kind of the most quiet, interesting individual I've ever met. When I first met her, I thought, I cannot believe anybody would do business with you, because she walked around with tie-dye t-shirts and blue jeans on in 1997, and she got a lot of business. Back in the day, her minimum financial planning fee was $14,000 a year, and people were bending over backwards to work for her because she was that good. But she was not the typical person. I was thinking she would have the Armani suits, and she didn't. But man, she knew her stuff, and she was one of my mentors. And the bottom line is, you just have to do it. If you can't, then maybe this is not a great business for you. That's the reason people fail.
I think that's true about a lot of different things. Is we tell ourselves stories about why we're not going to do this right away, and we convince ourselves, right? I think you're right. That the first step is just, you got to put in the effort to make things happen. So let's talk about, though, if you're in that seat, you're doing it, what are some tips around closing techniques and how you've got somebody on the phone or in a meeting, how do you go from prospect to closing? What's some of your takeaways?
Right. Well, again, it took me a long time to figure this out. I start in the area of risk management. Now, it's very easy for me because I always tell my personal story. Let me tell you what bad planning looks like. And here's, I tell my personal story. Most people start off with investments. So I'll draw a big dollar sign on my whiteboard or on my screen or whatever. And I'll say, you know what, whether you have $1 million or 10 million or anywhere in between, if an event would happen, and let me assure you, those events happen in a split second of time that would cause you to lose all your money. I don't really care how good your mutual fund is, your ETF portfolio. And I tell people, I start in the area of risk management. I have a process. I call it my visions and values conversation. If we decide to work together, and again, I leave it open to if I take them on as clients. Okay, it's not like whether they're the only ones making a decision. I get to decide who I want to work with. But I'm going to ask you. We're going to have a specific meeting for the purpose. I'm going to ask you about. Tell me about you. I'll start with the woman always, because she'll tend to talk more. Tell me about your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, your nieces, your nephews. But I'm saying, I start with, I say, Christine, tell me about your mom. And I want to know her name. And I'm writing these things down. I want her story. I give these people an entire hour to talk about their story. Tell me about your dad. What was his name and what did he do? We take an enormous amount of time. And then we talk about each brother, each sister, each brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and then their kids. Because I tell them, I'm looking for two things. One, potential train wrecks. What could come along and disrupt your plans for having a wonderful retirement or whatever it is, or opportunities either in lifetime or death to take care of the people or the causes that you care about. When you get that granular with people, one, they have now revealed to me more than they've revealed to anybody on the planet. And I tell them, I'm not trying to get into your personal business, but let me assure you, especially people who have money, and if they are nice and they care about people, they tend to take on all the problems of their extended families. If you don't do that, here you think you're planning Christine's retirement, and you have no idea that her sister has issues, her brother's in drug rehab. I mean, you don't know these things. And you don't know that she feels responsible for taking care of all of those people. And therefore, if anything happens over here, that's going to greatly impact the planning I do for her now. It is a unique selling proposition, I think, because I don't see very many advisors going to that lengths. And I will tell you this, women have a much bigger advantage in that area than men. Because men are like, oh, that's just so touchy-feely. Yeah, it is. It's called caring about people.
you're hitting on something really important here is, so you're right. I've never had my advisor. I've had several ask me those questions, but that gets into psychologically why you're trying to build your investment and what are the trigger events or life events that matter and who else do you feel accountable. And to me, if someone actually asks those questions, I would be much more inclined to say, this is a person I will trust. Because that what you just described is by listening and hearing and learning about the person in their whole life, then I'm more apt to trust you and want to do business with. So that is an excellent tip on how to approach clients. A lot of people leave with product and about the product. I hate that. I always say that even in our sales for what we do at Investment News, I always say, start by hearing what the client wants to accomplish first, and then the solutions come with.
Well, and even deeper than that, Christine, start by finding out about the person on the other end of the line. I mean, you and I have had wonderful conversations, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like we could be girlfriends, if we lived in the same area and stuff like that, because we took the time to get to know each other. And it's kind of like, how dare I ask them to turn over their life savings when I don't know anything about them? I don't know what they care about. I mean, I personally can't even imagine doing that, but I know that there's a lot of advisors who don't. And so to me, my process of my visions and values conversation, it's like taking candy from babies because nobody else has gone there. They're leaving the relationship on the table to be exposed.
And I know you get into a lot of this in your training. So I want to go back to your training course again and just sort of, you said it roughly takes 6 months, but can you tell us about the modules and the key pieces of it that are important?
Yeah, the first module is called the Elite Mindset. And again, I take people through about a 5-week training program talking about, and they have to do a lot of exercises. I mean, one of the things I have them do, believe it or not, is to write their own eulogy.
Oh, yes.
Because to me, it's like, how do you as a person want to be remembered? So, because none of this matters. I mean, we all end up in a big box someplace, our ashes strewn someplace, right? To me, it's much, who do you want to become in this process? And so I actually give them my eulogy so they can see, this is what I want my son to say about me at my funeral. This is what I want my husband, my best friend. Again, you back into who is it that you want to become? And then you're like, okay, you look at it from a 30-year time frame, and then you back it down into, now what do I do next week kind of thing, right? Elite mindset is just hugely important. But again, I don't blast them with, here, take an entire weekend and binge watch Erin Botsford, although people do that, because we can. The other thing is we can dole it out to them an hour a week, which is so manageable, or we can open up the entire course so they can binge watch, which a lot of advisors are very big quick starts and they just want to get through everything. Whatever works for you and your learning style. The second course, again, is my secret sauce. It is the capstone of my course. I used to bring it later on there, but now people just want to know, what do you say when you get in front of me? How did you have such an incredible closing ratio? And so I was like, okay, but you got to learn it and you got to master it. The third course is on marketing and prospecting, 9 things that I did over the years to bring in new business. The fourth one is on the team member training. I bring Jennifer in. Jennifer helps train your assistant. And what I tell people is it's 4 weeks. And in those 4 weeks, on Tuesdays and Thursdays or 2 days a week, bring your team in, buy them lunch, and then tee up my training for about 30 minutes and then talk about it for 30 minutes and decide what portions of my training do you want to incorporate in your firm. Maybe you're doing some other things better. And then the last course is the machine. I typically say you might not want your team to be the machine course, because I talk about how to compensate, how to hire, train, compensate people so that you get the best results out of them. And so the idea is, one of my goals always, after I met Paul that one day, was I wanted to have 2 offices, 7 conference rooms full of clients of my firm, and I wasn't in any of those. And that's what ended up happening. It does mean, and I know another question that you're going to follow up with is, well, what does that take? Christine, you cannot build a business on your own. You can build a practice. It's like a doctor's practice. You can build a practice, but even doctors have PAs and they have other people. And the hard part about that in our industry is we become financial advisors because we like advising people. But then we go 25 or 30 years, and because the business is dependent on us meeting with every single client, it has no value in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be stated over and over and over again. So you've got to think about build a business that runs without you, whether you show up or not, those clients are served.
Absolutely. There's a lot. Well, we've covered a lot, and I'm really excited about the course and the way you did the modules and the way people approach it. I loved your advice of bring the team together, whether it's virtual or in person in these times. Do 30 minutes of the training and then 30 minutes of discussion, because that's how you get everyone bought into the approach program. And
totally.
Training too is being collaborative is such a better approach than just trying to go it on your own. Boy, by the time this is over, we're going to have lots of people binge watching. Eyes are all over instead of things like Tiger Kings. How much better? Because we can do a lot more good for humankind if we binge watch.
No kidding.
Like this. So I think, Erin, what we'll do is we'll end this episode. On the next episode is how you build the team and the right team. We talked a lot about the training and the things you need to do and starting with the elite mindset. But then to your point, if you're going to build a business that not only creates income and does good, but creates valuation for later down the road, then there's some key things you need to do to achieve that level of success as well. So I'm fascinated by all of this and can't wait to get into that in our final episode.
Okay, sounds good. I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Her Success Matters. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available, and share this podcast with others that believe her success matters.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Investment News. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.